All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching this. My name is Ruben Quinones. I'm from Amsive. I am excited about today's session, optimizing the checkout. The last few sessions we've had have been all geared at the retail experience or just retail and e-commerce. They were more media focused. This one goes a little bit deeper into the funnel, right? Because you can bring as much qualified audiences as possible, but if you can't convert them or you're not able to optimize that experience, then you're missing out on a lot of opportunity. So, looking forward to this particular session because I know this is a challenge for a lot of brands. Is how do you optimize the experience? How do you increase your conversion rates? Reduce the abandonment, in the cart, and excited because we have a great partner with us joining us today. So with that, I'm gonna start making introductions, and then we'll get right into it. I know we're live on LinkedIn and on Meta, and potentially YouTube. We'll try to keep an eye on comments, but we'll get right into it. So my first guest actually works with me as a colleague. Gosh, for the last I'm gonna say 10 plus years. Tom, 10 years
We're
plus?
dating ourselves, but yeah, about 10 to 15 years,
I
Ruben.
know we're getting old. So Tom, what do you do now? Just we used to work for 10 plus years. You worked at another agency. We acquired you, not you specifically, but your company a couple years ago. And you've been working on e-commerce brands for, gosh, 2 decades, I would say. So
Yeah,
why don't you
yeah.
tell me what you do and your experience?
I've been in the e-com space since about 2009 or sooner or earlier than that. Now I'm currently the EVP of Digital Strategy and Technology at Amsive. So spend most of my time working with clients, get the most out of their digital platforms, working in those platforms. I've been, like you said, I've been in e-com essentially my whole career. So most of that time spent, most of those platforms are the major e-com platforms like BigCommerce and Shopify and Adobe Commerce, aka Magento.
Yeah, yeah, I remember our Magento days. And so, we work with all of those providers still. They certainly bring a lot of value to our brands,
Yep,
that we our clients that we work with. But we have a growing partnership with Big Commerce.
for
Why
sure.
why is that?
Yeah. We always say BigCommerce is sort of that like middle of the road sweet spot, right? You've got the spectrum when it comes to e-com platforms. You've got uh, very complex but very customizable on one end, and simple and kind of limited and restricted on the other. BigCommerce sort of sits in the sweet spot there in the middle. They've really adopted that open SaaS approach, meaning they have more public API endpoints than other people, which is what you essentially need in order to make those customizations that you want. Their B2B functionality is really best in class in terms of the different SaaS platforms. We also, and this sounds kind of cheesy, but we really love the people at BigCommerce, and that's like a real thing. Like I have made
That
some.
sounds cheesy, but okay.
Yeah, well, the e-com, if you're in the e-com space, I think it makes sense. Like everyone in the e-com space, when you go to the shows, you know everyone. It's a really awesome community. And I've got, what I now consider to be friends at BigCommerce, right, that I've been working with for years. So
Great.
when it comes to, working for your clients, doing the right thing for the client, having the right partner really makes all the difference.
Good stuff. I know you don't want me to ask this, but fun fact? No fun fact?
I'm a boring guy. Don't ask
What?
me the fun fact.
But maybe do you play teacher? Because it looks like you have a chalkboard, or that's the color. Sorry.
So okay. So,
It looks chalk. You could just start
yeah.
teaching
Yeah,
e-commerce in the
this
back.
is what happens when my wife lets me pick the paint color. It looks like a chalkboard.
All right.
Fun fact:
So,
I'm not good at interior decorating.
all right, we're gonna bring in our next guest from BigCommerce, Lauryn Spence. I appreciate you joining us today. Lauryn, what do you do there? And tell me a little bit about BigCommerce.
Hey there, hey Ruben, hey Tom. Thank you so much for having me. Lauryn Spence here. I'm the director of our agency partner program for the Americas. I've been with the company for about 9 years now, so I've certainly seen it all, I would say. And go way back with Tom, as you mentioned earlier, just around long-term relationships at BigCommerce, that is a thing internally as well. So BigCommerce, so for those listening, Tom, I think you described that quite nicely, but we're a very, very flexible open SaaS e-commerce platform for mid-market enterprise brands, really spanning across just about any vertical you could think of, from simple to complex in both D2C and B2B. So ultimately, we're here to help brands grow revenue, reduce costs on the website, as well as every channel where their products are listed online. And that's by way of our acquisition of Quinones. It's an omnichannel feed management platform for BigCommerce, Shopify, Salesforce, and beyond. It's e-com platform agnostic. So very excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I get a feeling your fun fact is funner than Tom's. You mentioned a little bit, and yes, I'm curious. What is your fun fact?
I think so this picture back here is a good giveaway. I maybe have an unhealthy obsession with Jim Carrey. We'll call it healthy.
Bring the picture over so we can have context, or sorry.
Sure.
I didn't know you was gonna.
Well, essentially we can try.
Just don't break anything. Oh wait, that's a lot bigger than I thought. I thought it was
and I forgot I had a picture behind it, so that's really fun. But there's a caricature of me as Ace Ventura. One of our partners drew this for me, Eric Young at EY Studios. And that is my boss, Dan Furtig, as the monkey on my back.
Cool. All right, just don't break it. I don't want to.
No, won't break it. But I'm a big Jim Carrey fan, and have lots of little knickknacks like that.
Well, that's a longer conversation. Ace Ventura, you look younger than you are. Or you just got into it.
I just got into it, and I'm also a big fan of In Living Color. I went to the archive, so.
In Living Color. Those were the good Jim Carrey days, right? Fire Marshal Bill.
Yeah. It's all gold to me.
All right. So let's dive right into it. I figured we'd do some table setting. We can't talk about optimizing the experience without understanding some benchmarks, right? That's like a question we all get is why, what's a typical conversion rate? Now, take this with a grain of salt, right? These are our category level ones. And let me just make sure this is showing okay. There we go. So we kind of pulled together in the e-commerce space. I don't know that this covers it all, but just to get an idea of by category level, where we stand as far as conversion rates are concerned. I don't know if there's anything missing here. If you guys know about otherwise, I think this kind of pretty much covers it all. Between 1.25% to 5%. And then, of course, AOV is going to play a role. Obviously, the higher the average order value, the lower the conversion rate. So there's a lot of dimensions to it and nuances to this as well. And I would imagine maybe also newer websites, right? You don't have that brand affinity, so lower conversion rates. Is there anything I'm not thinking about that could impact e-commerce conversion rates before we get into reasons for people abandoning?
I mean, I would just say I love that F&B is now an e-commerce category, right? As somebody who orders all their groceries online, the fact that food and beverage is like a mainstream e-com category, that was so awesome. No, I think you nailed it, Ruben. When you look at the categories, it's really, there's a lot of caveats in there, right? Because it's really generalized. You've got fashion and apparel, you've got everything from budget to luxury in there, right? And there's obviously a direct correlation between price point and conversion rate on every e-com site. So I think you nailed it. Those are sort of the takeaways. It's nice to have the benchmarks, and we get asked by clients all the time, what's a good conversion rate? And the answer is never really a good one, right? It's always, it depends. I think that really kind of illustrates that. You have to kind of nest that AOV chart inside each category chart to really get that answer.
But if it's a 0.0001%, that's not good.
You're doing something wrong.
That's satisfying. I'd say confirm from the platform side. We run a lot of data and conversion metrics like this for our merchants selling both D2C and B2B, and I'd say that's pretty on the mark, right? In terms of where you see higher conversion metrics in categories like fashion apparel, where there's definitely more of that impulse buying, or the likelihood of I'm buying something that I might return later because, I want to see if it fits, versus, home appliances. No one's impulse buying a refrigerator, right? Like these are thousands of dollars. Like you want to take time, and also there's other considerations, and are there the right payment options, right? So there's just so many factors that go into it. But I'd say those are good benchmarks and realistic expectations to set. And it definitely matters what your category is, as well as what type of business you are, right? D2C, B2B, or a mixture of both.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then, beyond that, it's like, well, what channel are we talking about as well, right?
Yeah.
New versus returning, right? Email versus direct traffic, organic, etc. So again, take these as a grain of salt, but at least it kind of gives you some benchmarks to look at, either by category or by AOV. So let's actually explore, what are the reasons or the most recent data out there as it relates to why people abandon the cart. So this is Baynard, right? We typically look at this. I think they put out a report every 2 years, I want to say, and not as much has changed. Maybe a few points here and there as it relates to payments, but either shipping costs are too high, or there is no guest checkout. I don't trust the site. I don't know if that's something that we still hear in this space, right? But again, that goes back to brand affinity. I think the credit card decline has gone down maybe in the last 2 years, and I don't know that there's anything that brands can do for that. That's just a user error. And then, we'll dive into, I guess, the too long, complicated checkout process. But again, kind of setting the table to kind of understand, well, what are the reasons people are actually abandoning the cart? Um, and again, 68% end up abandoning, once they've added items. Anything else to add here? I think this is self-explanatory.
I'd say, yeah, none of these shock me or surprise me. It's probably worth talking about a few, right? Like, I mean, that top one around delivery expectations and shipping. I mean, if we think about how all of us shop today, like the Amazons, other big box retailers of the world, like Target, Walmart, you name it, it feels like, same day or 2 day shipping is ubiquitous, right? Like that's something that is almost an expectation now, and we've all been conditioned into it. But yeah, these I've seen the studies, yes, over year, and that these continue to be pain points. So it's interesting. These kind of don't change, like they're still persisting, right?
Very consistent for many years, right?
Yeah.
I think some are getting better, right? You talk about, like starting with sort of the basics of having like a technically sound checkout, right? You talk about uptime and errors and things like that. I think as the world has moved more into the SaaS space, there's just less of that, thankfully, I say, from my side of the table, right? We've been able to offload that to the platform side, which has really helped. I mean, hopefully there aren't too many people that are still on legacy proprietary e-com systems. If you are, there's a whole better world out there you should explore. But
Hope for you.
I shouldn't make those generalizations because there are those use cases where it is applicable and makes sense. But if you are in that situation, invest in good application performance monitoring, something like a New Relic, so that those things are surfaced to you. You don't have to be testing it yourself every day, and it's sort of automated. Even if you run a great SaaS platform, they are customizable more and more now, right? There's plugins and apps and all sorts of things you can add to the checkout now, and those need to be tested and validated and all of that as well.
So Tom, I think you hit on right the what is it? The 17% that kind of encounter an error. So you hit on, I guess, updated plugins, security. Maybe on the marketing side, what are the top things I might need to know that a development needs to do a QA every X amount of time, or they need to make sure they have this? plug in? What does that look like?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think again, it depends sort of like what platform you're on. If you're on an on-prem platform versus a SaaS platform, you know, the answer is like all the time. If you're, you know, on something that's a little bit more automated, you know, you obviously want to do a ton of prep before Black Friday, Cyber Monday, you know, to ensure you can, you know, or whatever your particular seasonal spikes are, to make sure you can handle, you know, high volume. Otherwise, it's probably based around your upgrade and your development cycle, right? How often are you making changes to it? If you don't touch it, chances are it won't break. But you know, at least from a SaaS perspective. So you know, I think it really sort of depends on, you know, how frequently you're making updates to that checkout.
You know, and I would think, you know, there's several ways to go about it, right? As far as getting alerts. I know there's alerts for when the site is down. I don't know if there's alerts when the checkout process has an issue.
Sure.
But obviously, you know, if you get a X amount of orders typically, and you get an alert that orders are.
There's a couple of safeguards there, right? So I mentioned, you know, New Relic and APM monitoring. So with tools like that, you can create what's called synthetic tests that simulate a user going through the process, and will alert you if it fails at any point. You can also create smart alerts in Google Analytics, right? Where if there's a deviation from your usual traffic or, you know, conversion or goal events or anything within a certain threshold, you know, it'll alert you, sort of like a low code way of doing it, you know?
Yeah.
So there's lots of options out there.
Tom, what were those two tools you mentioned that will simulate a user checking out?
Synthetic testing. So there's a bunch of ways you can do that. We generally use New Relic for that on our team, but there's other options too, even some simpler ones like Pingdom, you know, things like that.
Very good. And big, I don't know if I guess that falls on the responsibility of the marketer and or the agency, right? So
yeah, typically, I mean, there's ways you can obviously preview and test the checkout, and you know, various apps you can set up for alerts. But you know, we have a very partner first approach, and you know, majority of our customers, given that we are a SaaS platform, a lot of those cost savings are being reinvested with agencies such as Amsive, right, to really optimize the ongoing site experience, marketing, very growth-oriented services, and this exactly falls in that bucket, right? Like, it is a full-time job, right? The brand should focus on selling the products, not keeping the lights on or worrying about these issues. So that's where I feel there's just such inherent value from the Amsive side to really monitor that and really optimize that, test it, to ensure that, you know, the actual brand is keeping up with buyer expectations and that there's no errors.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. So that's, you know, that's one point, right? Just looking at and kind of foolproofing as much as possible, you know, the checkout process from a technical standpoint. I want to talk a little bit about, I guess, you know, what you can control. And you would think, well, you can't really control shipping costs, but you could control where you show it in the process, right? And I guess me being more on the media side, I'll kind of just check that box in knowing that if you set that expectation up front, think about the dollars that you don't have to spend to retarget to individuals that are abandoning the cart. So depending on how much money you're spending on the media side, you know, that could add up a lot. So are there any other benefits, I guess? And that's the only one I can kind of think of, is managing those expectations up front so they don't go through that process and, you know, feel, I guess, underwhelmed when they realize, oh, I can't buy this product. Is there anything else I'm not thinking of? And that's fine if not.
I mean, I would just say I really agree. I think you just don't want any surprises at checkout, right? Like no, like hidden additional fee or like something in the shipping category. I feel like we're all conditioned for that to be free anyway. So if you can't do that as a business, I would definitely look into, you know, discounting, maybe even showing that it's discounted. Like there's psychological levers that you could do, right? Looking like you've discounted the shipping price a certain level, so it feels like they're getting that savings in the checkout flow. But like over communicate like throughout that process, even like before they add something to cart, right? They're going to want to know when they could expect to deliver it. And then I'd say the other piece of that coin, make sure that your inventory and systems are all up to date and synced, right? You don't want them to add something to the cart only to find that they can't actually complete that checkout. right? So
Yeah.
that's another frustrating experience. Like that kind of goes hand in hand with the shipping. Like, oh, can't actually ship this. We've sold out.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? So sorry, go ahead, Tom.
Shipping price and shipping time, right? Like again, going back to Amazon has kind of ruined it for all of us, right? You go to on the PDP, it's telling you you're going to get it, tomorrow or Wednesday or whatever day. Huge benefit to consumers for that.
And is there, again, I'm impromptu question here. It's not in the line of questioning, but is that an ability to do that within BigCommerce? Is there a plugin for that, or to be able to kind of set that up front? Okay.
Yeah. So I think, like shout out to Shipper HQ, who I think most people are using in the space today for that functionality and a whole lot more when it comes to shipping. They really are sort of the go-to for that.
Yep. Cool. Yeah. Really native capabilities there built in. And then as well as the ability, I think, and flexibility to display that in different places on PDPs throughout checkout. Like that to me is the most important, not just communicating the delivery expectations. It's where and when. That's really critical.
Yeah. So there's basically user experience, especially if it's a first time purchaser. You don't want to create that negative experience. And then the media dollars as well. So those are two big critical points actually that you can control just by setting up the expectation and providing those costs up front. A big barrier in the industry obviously is to battle the big gorilla in the e-com space. You mentioned Amazon, right? And reason why I may even just ship directly to Amazon is because it's just easy, right? They already have my account, etc. So how can we make that a little bit more frictionless if what is it, X%, or it's too complicated. 22% say it's too complicated. How do we uncomplicate that? I guess, Tom, talk a little bit about guest checkout. Is that?
Yeah. I mean, I think this could be a 2-day long conversation, right? About all the things you can do to simplify the checkout, but that really is the key, right? Keep it simple. First, I would say, if we're talking sort of the standard D2C type checkout here on site, do a lot of UX testing on that, right? Make sure all the little things work. Like, you usually have step 1, shipping, step 2, billing. Make sure if somebody hits the back button, it doesn't take them back to the cart, right? It takes them back to the last step. Things like address autocomplete, like the pet peeve for me. Like if you're a brand without address autocomplete, we just can't be friends. I just don't make me tab into 4 different address lines to fill out my address. But then, there's all those expedited, payment methods and checkout options right now. And I think that's where we're really just seeing all the consumer interest and success. And, you mentioned Amazon Pay. Of all of those things like Apple Pay, et cetera, Amazon Pay is the one I think we actually see the most consumers use for most of our clients, which is always really interesting. Lauryn, I'm not sure what you're seeing on your side, if it's similar.
You're nailed on the head. I think payments is ultimately what's going to unlock the most flexibility and going to drive the most conversion. So anyone listening today, what's nice about this is a very agnostic piece of advice, right? Like you want to make sure that you're using a payment provider that's not going to create a whole lot of friction to checkout, right? And so one of the biggest things that we see in terms of cart abandonment, number one, is the site asks me to create an account. The second I have to go in and start putting my email and all this other stuff, like it's just such a headache. That's what makes me bail, makes a lot of people bail from that process. So a lot of ways getting around that are offering these digital wallets that Tom had mentioned. So Apple Pay, Google Pay, Amazon Pay. We even have options for buy with Prime integrations. If any of these brands are also using fulfillment by Amazon, you can have that button. It's that Prime-like experience, right? So they're kind of getting that shipping expectation met. But also OTPs, right? Right. So people just being able to have that one-time password, have that code sent to their phone, boop, boop, and go, right?
You down with OTP? Sorry, I had to say that.
Yes. Definitely down with OTP.
What is an OTP? Just for folks.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to kind of start some acronym bingo. One-time password. So think of like, multi-factor authentication. So instead of creating an account and entering all my information, it's a way of starting the checkout process, you'll enter your email or phone number. It'll send you a code, right? You use that special code in the checkout, right? You just click it from your text message, and your payment and shipping options are already auto-populated. So, I mean, the checkout process is essentially going to be like less than 15 seconds. Right. So, and then, same honestly goes for a lot of digital wallets too. Like if there's Apple Pay anywhere, I'm done. I'm buying your product. Like it's too easy. Just get the biometrics. So I'd say there's a lot of benefits there, right? Sure. I mean, I know a lot of people want their customers to create an account. Like you're wanting to get that first party data, get more information for retargeting, but it's better to ultimately get the sale, I'd say, at the end of the day. And there's other ways of going about getting that first party data more meaningfully through loyalty programs and other, like targeting methods.
Right.
Since you started the acronym game, I guess, what about BNPL, Lauryn? How do you feel about that?
Love it. It's also dangerous. I've got a Peloton right next to me. Paying off through a firm.
You can say the acronym, but you actually have to say what it means.
I did. Buy now, pay later.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Buy now, pay later. Some well-known ones, Affirm and Klarna. There's tons of them out there, but that's a game changer. We're going back to like the high AOVs or other categories. Like let's say you're selling mattresses, home products, like things that, anything like over a couple $100, I'd say, would justify a buy now, pay later option, right? Or even luxury items like sunglasses. I've seen that being offered, right, to justify a really bougie spend on something so small. But it just makes it so frictionless, especially when it's interest-free payments that feel like nothing over a long period of time. That's a big game changer and something everyone should be considering, like really across varying AOVs.
Yeah, so let me take a step back because you guys got very excited and you started throwing acronyms, and so there's a few things that I want to kind of extrapolate from everything that was said. So guest checkout, right? So even like, and you can do this in incremental steps too, right? I mean, maybe that alone, and gosh, I remember one of our first CRO projects, I want to say 7-8 years ago, was actually a guest checkout process. 50 to 60% conversion rate difference between introducing that versus not. And you can test this, right, Tom? So we think that CRO is just for landing pages, but correct me if I'm wrong. You can.
No, I mean, CRO, we do all sorts of A/B and multivariate testing. We can test 10 different elements on a page simultaneously, different traffic splits based on different segment types, traffic source, et cetera. So yeah, I mean, if you need to prove it out to your boss or someone else who doesn't agree, there's definitely the tools to do that.
It's a great thing about digital, right? It's like you can theorize all day long. Like, why don't you just test it?
Yep.
And I always say on the SEO side, I'm like, well, why don't you spend a couple $100 on a paid campaign so you actually know what your keyword research should be?
Yep. Expedite that. Yep.
But and by the way, as I'm thinking, there's also site search on site. All right, not to deviate from the checkout process. So there's the guest checkout experience. Then we talked about really payments as a whole, right? Could it get overwhelming by introducing too much by any chance?
I think so. I mean, I think it's best to go with some leaders in the space, right? Like, I would definitely try and figure out like who your customer base is, like, and again, through testing, what are they gravitating towards, and probably lean in with the top 2 or 3 options. I don't know. So then there's another school of thought of like, hey, if they're all there in a nice, easy view and it's still like above the fold in the page and I can just click it, that might increase the likelihood of someone buying, right? And by the way, from the merchant point of view, processing through ACH and some of these wallets, it's actually a lot cheaper than credit card transactions. So there's inherent benefits for you as a brand in doing that and providing those options. So I'd say that kind of depends on the category and preference and who your buyers are. So I hate that that's an answer all the time if it depends. It really does.
I think on like a broader level, like that's the right answer, right? Like when I think we see companies get into trouble when they stop kind of designing and building for the masses, and it's like they're trying to accommodate every possible use case and edge case. And then, it's so watered down, and the user journey that you've created is not really well defined, and that's where everything just gets more complicated, and you get away from that whole like keep it simple thing.
Yeah, it's like, hey, do you really need the crypto BitPay option?
Right, one person using it a year. Do you really need every user to see that option and have it as a distraction? Probably not.
Yeah, but I will say too, just on the payments again, kind of back to some of the shipping expectations, like having those buttons be on the PDP pages, having very loud calls to action like buy now, and making it very clear and very actionable on what they're doing. I think that also helps increase conversion, right? And also like making sure the image like of what they're buying passes through. You'd be surprised people like forget what they're buying because they're watching TV, they're multitasking, they're doing this. It's all on their phone, right? It's another benefit. Like all of these tools are mobile optimized now, so the benefit of SaaS. So making sure those things run through. And for some reason, if you can't work with one of these OTPs or wallets, and let's say you need to have a traditional process for whatever reason, there's other things you can do, like having progress bars on the bottom of each step so that they know like, okay, I'm about to be done. I'm about to finish, right? Like it's all about setting expectations and making them feel like I'm making progress. I know what's next. That's what's going to get someone to convert. You're like leading them to water.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It sounds, you don't want that blanket all approach of it depends, but it sounds like if you kind of marry the idea of it almost like it's, guest checkout. I don't see how that doesn't help. Right. Right. Like I just don't see how that doesn't help, but you could test it. But a good testing framework, because you never really know what payments your audience prefers until you start introducing it. But then what is the right balance between being overwhelmed and introducing something that we think is going to convert well?
Yeah.
So it's almost like doing well, let's actually do PayPal and this digital wallet in this scenario versus this scenario. And I guess on the back end, they'll see what they're using.
They will. I actually, a quick note on this. You reminded me because you mentioned PayPal. Like I do think, not all solutions are created equal, right? Like let's take OTPs as an example. It's all about the user data. So PayPal is about to go live with Fastlane. That's their OTP. And they've got a user network of 430 million users across varying e-com platforms. Wow. So that's a massive network. So if you look at, how likely are my shoppers to convert if I have an option like that where their information is already saved, you do need to consider that, right? Like you should back a couple horses. I'd say like PayPal is probably going to be a clear winner in this space once that goes live. There's a lot of different options out there, but I mean, that's something to consider, right? Yeah. We did a study, in fact, just kind of going back to testing, folks that were using our optimized one-page checkout coupled with a wallet, like a leading wallet, like Apple Pay or PayPal or Stripe, something in the leading category, right? Yeah. Checkout conversion rates were about like 70.9%. Visit to order conversion rate were like 3.1%. Which is a lot higher than the internet average. Like, so it does make a difference. And again, not all platforms are created equal. We have an optimized one-page checkout to make that easier, which folks like you can customize because we've open sourced it. You can make all the tweaks you like, but it does make a difference to go with some leaders, and figuring out who that is for your audience, I think matters.
Yeah, and I literally just thought of this, and you guys, I'm bouncing off of you. Again, this is live. Some of these questions aren't even questions I've provided, but I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, you could go into your analytics platform to understand not only the browser, but the device and the type of phone, right? So you can make some of the assumptions that, Apple Pay makes sense because 70% of our audience is using this device that's coming to the site versus, Google, is it Google Play? I don't know what their payment provider is. But am I thinking of that right?
Yeah. I mean, that data definitely exists in even the most basic, GA analytics platform. I think, where you do have to do some testing though is, so like Lauryn made a great point earlier about putting Apple Pay on the PDP, right, on the product page. But where you have to do some testing is like, okay, that might increase conversion rate, but decrease your average order value because people are buying from the PDP and not going to a cart where you can upsell them something, right? And then you have to decide, which is more valuable, right? Financially and from a data perspective, order capture perspective, right? So there's some analytics and some math that needs to happen there. I mean, as a customer, I prefer having Apple Pay on the PDP, but when it comes to driving revenue, there's some formulas there to look at.
So we would think the best practice is to have it on the PDP rather than later on in the process, is what I'm hearing.
From a purely conversion rate perspective, yes.
Yeah.
But again, like with somebody's browsing multiple pages and going to a cart where we can have personalized upsells, for example.
Right. Cross-sell, upsell, promotions. Your AOV, just on the conversion, you will make that higher. The AOV,
right?
Maybe not so much.
Right. And then, again, which sort of opens up a whole other question about how do we feel about upsells in the checkout, right? Like, I don't know where you guys stand on that. Again, I prefer fewer distractions, the better once you have somebody at that point in the funnel. I'd say there's probably some exceptions, warranties on the fridge you're buying or whatever, an upsell like that might make sense. But
I feel like it has to be a recommended product that makes sense to buy it with the thing. So if I'm buying some type of special cleanser, if there's a moisturizer that's coupled with it that I was missing or forgetting, or the applicator for a makeup, things like that, that makes sense. But I get kind of annoyed when there's upsells in the cart, just blatant upsells, like, oh, this feels spammy.
Especially if you mentioned before, we forget what we're buying. It's like, let them just buy it. They don't know what they're buying. I'm going to challenge our thinking here because, again, I just come up with stuff on the spot. I don't even know if this is even possible. Tom, you gut check me. But is there a way to know, all right, they're coming from this device, they're on an Android, so they're going to get this experience because they're on.
Sure.
You could have a separate stream that is, so you're, okay, so I guess.
Well, in general, that's how the mobile wallets work, right? Like if you're not on Safari on an Apple device, we don't show an Apple Pay logo because it won't work. So that piece of it is sort of like out of the box with in most cases. Same with product type. There's some product types, like I think there's some, I can't remember the details, but there's some exclusion with digital products and PayPal, so if there's like a digital product in the cart, you don't show certain checkout methods and things like that. But if you wanted to personalize or customize the entire journey based on that, you definitely could.
Got it. So there's some out-of-box solutions for that, but then if you're seeing a pattern of, if they're coming from this browser or this device, generally they seem to convert better when there's these offers and or these.
Yeah, I think it's more by device type, right? Mobile versus desktop, et cetera. So like PayPal did an interesting study a while back, mobile versus desktop checkout stuff, and the promo code field on mobile, by collapsing that field by default, there's actually a really significant increase in conversion rate, because when you have it open, it draws attention to it, and then people like me say, oh, let me go try to Google and find a promo code, and then you lose people once they do that, right? So there's a whole bunch of device type specific things like that we usually do as part of this sort of the CRO work that we do.
Interesting. Yeah. Lauryn, you mentioned, so with PayPal and Fastlane, that has not been released yet, or what is
early beta? Yeah, we've been able to run some tests with our merchants, but it's not fully in GA.
Got it. Okay. Are there, and didn't ask this before, again, impromptu question, with AI, are we seeing anything with AI implications in the market as it relates to checkout? And if we don't, that's fine. I'm just, because it's a hot topic. Maybe there's AI-ing your CRO testing, right? And kind of introducing. I know that's available, right?
Yeah.
That we need
we
to
actually Yeah, so we actually just released a bunch of new AI capabilities and features within BigCommerce. One of them are AI-based promotional capabilities, so you can make like actually have targeted promotions, like with various custom fields, like based on the products and those attributes, like have a promotion for that specific product generated. Like if these things are added together, or if there's recommendations of products you do want to sell together, maybe not in the cart, but like down below that screen, like once you add something in the cart, and then there's frequently bought together products, have some AI-based recommendations based on that shopper and their interests, coupled with the data of others that have bought that product before, right? So we're partnering with Google for their AI capabilities to release a lot of this. And so, yeah, I mean, 100%, like AI is going to continue. I mean, think about like chat bots, right? And think about like wanting to ask a few questions in checkout to make sure like I'm getting my questions answered. I mean, there's AI there, right? Like there's it's gonna continue to permeate more and more, but those are just a couple examples.
Yeah, and I think we're just seeing it every part of the tech stack now. Like, I mean, yes, checkout, fraud detection, all that stuff, but product recommendations, neural search, like Algolia's got some cool stuff now. The PIMs have all really been implementing them. Like Akinio just came out with a bunch of tools.
Okay, you're just name dropping stuff. You're gonna have to slow down. The PIMs, what?
Lauryn knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah. All the partners, all the AIs.
Yeah, so the product management applications like Akinio, who we work with, have all sorts of cool AI stuff baked in now for product enrichment purposes. And like I said, AI is everywhere. We're all being inundated with the AI hype, but it's got some really awesome use cases right now in e-com.
So at BigCommerce, there is some AI applications being baked in or being evolved, and then obviously on the Amsive side, we're kind of agnostic, but we're kind of always. I know we have a Slack channel. We have several Slack channels about AI. So currently, always, observing what's going on in the marketplace. That we've been mostly concentrated on-site checkout. I at least wanted to kind of tease potentially what we might do in the future, because the checkout doesn't just live on site. And maybe it might be good, Lauryn, to kind of go through this slide and kind of talk about the significance, and tell me if this is maybe too much to go through in 2 minutes. But talking about the diversification of how people are checking out, and how they're not just checking out on the website.
Absolutely. I'll give you my 60-second version, but essentially, the gist of these pie charts is just sharing that the lion's share of commerce is not happening on branded sites, right? It's happening on third-party channels and marketplaces. And if you look at the graph on the far right, what that's really sharing with you as the brand is, hey, you are responsible for at least half of the direct traffic that's going to come to your site, right? That you've cultivated through loyalty programs and personalization and awareness. But the other 50% of that traffic is going to come from advertising on various channels or via SEO, right? Affiliate links and other areas. So that's why it's hard to talk about checkout in a vacuum of just like this cart page. It's all about product discovery, and you need to make sure that you are where your shoppers are, right? Based on that user base and being in the right channels, and that you're either one, advertising there so that they click back, and come to your website and you can, personalize an experience and win them over there, or ensure that your products are set up to be purchased through that channel, whether that's TikTok shops, Google, Target Plus, you name it. So yes, it doesn't just live there. You got to be thinking about the entire omni-channel network.
Yeah, and obviously, since Feedonomics is part of the family at BigCommerce, we're hoping to do a session, in the next few months.
I think, it makes sense to do a session just because, that kind of strategy is hard, especially in a cookieless world where there's a lot of challenges, as you know, as marketers with advertising. The only way to combat a lot of these challenges with the saturation is clean product data. And that's exactly the value that Feedonomics offers, and optimizing feeds for the right schema, partnered with an organization like yourself. So it's world-class, and I think worth a whole session just talking about like how they help with product discovery and conversion across all channels.
So that'll be in the queue. It'll definitely happening. So just keep an eye out for that. So I guess with that, some parting thoughts. Who should I go with first? Tom, I introduced you first, so you'll go first now.
Okay. I would just circle back to keep it simple, right? I think, when you look at, we were saying how a lot of these things haven't changed, that's one of them. For years, we've been doing things where you enter the checkout and the main navigation and the header disappear, right? Just eliminate all the distractions, the upsells, all of that stuff, just kind of get rid of it when someone is at that point in the funnel and they're ready, just take the order and move on, don't get greedy.
Yeah.
Use address autocomplete.
Very cool. All right. So Tom, I'm going to let you go. Okay. Unless you want to stick around and listen to Lauryn.
You can kick me out when you're ready.
Go back to your chalkboard. Lauryn, parting thoughts.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. I'd say, we covered a lot today, but so if there's one takeaway, like focus on the lowest hanging fruit, right? What can you do today to simplify the nuts and bolts of checkout, right? Like your whole e-commerce business centers around this part of the funnel, right? So making sure that works, seamless, it's frictionless, it's fast. Invest in having, the right payment methods and try and, avoid forcing folks into creating accounts. Like make that simple. And if you're someone today that's not working with a modern, SaaS tech platform like a BigCommerce, and you're not able to test or make these types of changes quickly, that's something to think about, looking beyond, right? Like reasons to evaluate other platforms, because that's ultimately what's going to drive your business, right? Like that's the most important component. So it's worth the investment, worth looking at. Look at the low hanging fruit, and I promise it will make a difference.
I didn't do this for Tom, unfortunately, but if people want to follow you, I guess they can go on LinkedIn. It's Lauryn Spence.
Yes. Yes. Feel free to reach out, DM me if anything sounded interesting. I've, like I said, been in commerce for over a decade. I've run my own e-commerce business at a time. And it turns out I'm better at telling people what to do than doing it myself. I don't have time for that. I've got 2 kids, but certainly have been in the trenches, know it well, and happy to talk shop with anyone that wants to discuss further.
Lauryn, thank you so much. I appreciate you spending time with us and dropping some words of knowledge and acronyms as well.
Always here to do it. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye. All right, guys, that concludes another e-commerce session. This one in particular was optimizing the checkout. I do want to make a plug for our next one. If you stick around in 3 weeks, well, not stick around, you don't have to stick around, you can just log off and log back in 3 weeks. We're going to have, I forget the name of it, it's creating compelling CTV ads to drive e-commerce sales, something like that, to that nature. So connected TV has become so big. We're all talking about it, but well, how do we make it compelling to a user to take action and actually purchase online? Or what's some compelling creative that would work in the CTV space? So excited to have one of our partners come aboard and drop some knowledge on that end. So want to thank you for tuning in. If you have any ideas for topics down the road, we're going to be doing this every 3 weeks. Feel free to drop a comment or just send a direct mail. So whenever you're watching this, wherever you're watching this, I bid you a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. And that's it. Take care.